You have a picture of yourself framed in the background, Thorin?
I do actually, yeah.
Oh shit!
Not bad, eh?
Nice. With the crown on top.
Yeah,
Great.
why not? I mean, that was like the actual like get up was just when I did an event where they had a load of like props and he was supposed to like do stupid outfits and stuff. So, but I thought as a joke, since I actually had like a high quality image version, I would just make like a version like that. And I had one of my intros, where I was like looking at the picture and you couldn't see who it was, and I was joking like, you've got to always have someone in your life that you really love and keep close to you,
Yep.
And then I just reveal, obviously, it's just me as like just a little bit of the old bants. Right, this is going to be episode 79 of Listen Loco. Obviously, this is an LCS episode. We did LEC yesterday, which, I mean, goes without saying. That's why that wasn't as popular an episode, because everyone's a player who just watches the LCS. We all know that. So let's start out at the beginning here. So our guest for this episode is Amazing, who obviously was playing recently with 100 Thieves, who actually were very, very close to making it to the playoffs. They got into the tiebreakers in the end. And obviously used to, a long time ago now, play in a team that Locodoco actually coached. I mean, literally, we're talking like over half a decade ago at this point in time. So that was a while ago. So, yeah. Right, let's start out here, Amazing. So, obviously, what's interesting about the split for you is that you came to NA for this split, and the team you joined was basically a team where it's funny because actually I do notice that between the splits, a lot of people thought that 100 Thieves could get it together, but the way the split started was obviously appalling. Like, for people who don't know, you guys basically did almost like what Golden Guardians did in the first split, because you started 0-5 down. Yeah. Again, I don't know what the stats are, but I'm going to go ahead and guess, maybe like one team ever's maybe made the playoffs from there. Like, that's a pretty crazy stat to be down. Like, there can't be many teams that have ever made playoffs from 0-5 down. So what people might not realize is, even though it was quiet because it wasn't always in one big streak, you guys won 8 of the last 13 games. So towards the last 2/3 of the stage basically was going really well. So give us some thoughts. Like, when you came into 100 Thieves, from the outside, people probably thought this is just like one last gamble because the team's in bad shape, everything's fucked. Obviously, you didn't even actually technically have the same lineup at the time. Some days started the split. Ryu wasn't in the lineup. When you were coming into this environment, was there actually any hope internally? Was it a bit of a gamble on your part to go there?
I mean, it wasn't really a gamble on my part because I came from coaching and I didn't want to continue with Schalke at that very point. So I didn't really have anything else lined up. So for me, it was not really a gamble. I just went for it. But when I came here, there was still a lot of fire in the people. Like, especially Zach and Neil, they have a lot of internal fire, which I always bring to other people. And when I came to the split, we tried really hard to make everything work, especially making Max settle in. So everyone was actually extremely motivated to make it work. It just didn't work out as well as we hoped to, because of a lot of issues that we had in the beginning to get everyone together. Then me having a different play style, and then Neil trying to get my play style with a team. It was like a lot of things coming together at the same time. So it was a lot harder than I anticipated.
Right, just to clarify for people, Max is Saligo, who was the guy who was the mid laner at the time. Who is the other person you referred to?
Neil is Prolly and Zach is
Neil.
Afro.
Oh, right, I see. Okay.
My bad.
Right, that makes sense. Okay. So, yeah, well, one of the things that obviously was interesting, like I alluded to, was that the team went through some pretty big roster changes. Like, you took out Someday, who, if you'd have gone back even 6 months, a year ago, that's probably the one player people would say 100 Thieves had never removed because he looked like the most solid player. So, but there was obviously the contingent factor that you can't have more than a certain amount of imports. So if you wanted Ryu as the mid laner, you had to take out Someday, basically, because obviously Bang's going to remain in the team. So what was the logic internally on that one? Because actually people thought Ryu was done. They assumed he was never coming back.
Yeah, actually, we talked about it a lot, and there's some things I obviously cannot speak about, but it's like, we felt like that Ryu's shot calling, especially with my veteran leadership, would kind of synergize a lot better, because Ryu is someone that doesn't need to be led, and I'm someone that's, I think I'm somewhat impatient with a lot of people. So when I try to teach someone certain ways and like certain things, I don't know, like I have a really high standard from all of my mid laners so far. Every time I had a mid laner that was like, in terms of his game knowledge and like not quite up to par yet, I was struggling as a player too. So when I played with Caps, for example, when he started out, he didn't know anything. And I was really impatient with him too. At some point, I couldn't work with him either. So I performed really badly. And when I had someone like Björksen, when I had someone like Peke, it worked really well because I didn't have to lead him and he knew what to do at certain times without me actually mentioning anything. And that made a lot of things a lot easier then have me basically guide the team and a player basically micromanage him to a certain extent. So I think Rio just had to get in for us to basically alleviate or band-aid a lot of the issues that we had around the jungle change, and obviously around the team struggling as overall, So
didn't that actually make it, in a sense, an ideal spot for you to go to them? Because as a team, they looked like a team that lacked an identity, obviously had issues with shot calling. So I'm assuming they were pretty open to you just coming in and kind of doing what you want to do, right?
I'm not sure if they're that open to me in the beginning, but so when I had my first talk with Neil, with Polly, I think that's when kind of the flip switched a bit, where I think he saw a lot more in me than maybe other people saw in me before that, because for some reason every single spring split I'm not in a team anymore. I don't know what that is about, but that's a whole nother story. But I feel like when you had the first interview with Neil, I talked to him 3 hours. It was only supposed to be a 30-minute interview, and it kind of clicked where he saw passion I still had for the game, or still have for the game, and kind of saw that I could maybe make a team difference for the team, because I think my overall reputation now is catching up to what I'm actually doing. I think this split has done a lot for me, because it's been really vocal that I've been doing a lot of stuff, and then the broadcast has also hyped me up, that kind of stuff. So it has had my reputation actually catch up to what I actually am. I thought Schalke would kind of turn that around, but it didn't, because next split I wasn't signed. So, but yeah, now it's catching up to people actually know what I'm doing, what my agency is and everything.
You see how consistent he is, though, Loco, probably with his branding. He can't even close a conversation in 30 minutes. Even that has to fucking drag out to the very end, Fucking hell, anyway. So,
wait, amazing.
Totally on point, yeah.
One thing I wanted to ask you about is, since you talked about how now the broadcast is matching up who you are as a player, a big conversation is who is doing the shot calling internally with 100 Thieves. There's a lot of theories about, is it Aframu, is it Amazing? Because you guys have both been known to be really big shot callers. Well, he kind of
implied it there, but I guess the follow-up is this Amazing. I've also heard from many of the teams he was in, H2K, obviously with Prolly, that Ryu is a good shot caller. I mean, people know famously the KT Wolves, the teams he was actually amazing at some of the clever map movements they could do, but I know he's not someone who's he's not, the term in English is verbose. He doesn't use too many words. He's the kind of guy who just says something very succinct, a small sentence, right? So I'm guessing within that framework, you're the guy who talks the most, and he just says kind of his thoughts on what to do, or gives a point when he can go.
Yeah, kind of. I think me and Zach are basically overall the shot callers, so I'm basically directing the early game, mid game, and then Afro is taking over late game shot calling especially, and then Ryu, when he has the opportunity to actually say something important, for example, in early game when he sees the map movement that he needs to do, he's calling it out, and I think that's where strength is, where he knows he is able to follow everyone and understand the game plan at all times, but then can basically interpret it at very distinct moments and basically make that certain call, especially in important games, and I think that's what honestly is his strength as a player.
Right, if we look at the team, obviously since you came in and once you got the roster all set up, etc., this aspect of being the person in charge of the early game is pretty apparent in the game, because the team went from having a team, like I said, who had no identity. They basically just used to slowly lose games. That's how it pretty much was before you got there, to being a team where, whether you won the game or not, at least things were popping off in the early game. You're trying to make plays. If you notice the champions you were picking, they're pretty much all stuff you can engage on, right? So it seems like it was an ideal setup for you.
Yeah, I mean, it felt pretty nice once we had all the that roster together, especially Fake Out on top lane. He's someone that doesn't really require any kind of he doesn't any attention. I may go to his lane once or twice in a game, but that's about it. It's not like he's calling for it. So I could overall balance the game a lot better and help, especially the bottom lane out, who became a lot better throughout the split. Because Bang and Afro, when I came into the split, they had not real synergy between one another, but when they actually figured it out and really had these downright talks with one another, it became really apparent that they're actually really good bot lane when they want to be. So throughout the split, it basically developed. So once Fake Out came in and Rio came in, I could then focus on helping the bot lane, who became our team strength, and then help them pop off and help me pop off in the end.
One thing I did want to ask though, like I'm normally not the person who goes into like champion matchups and specifics like that because I don't claim to know that much about that part of the game. But I have to say, from the VODs I watched of your team, right, when you played Jarvan, which is one of your most picked champions this split, you lost most of the games. But I have to say, from actually watching the games, you were doing tons of good engages, catching people in the Cataclysm all the time. But it looked like your team wasn't very coordinated on like following up. Like sometimes they just backed out when you were going in, basically. So was there some sort of a problem in that respect? Like as a team, did they have a different style when you first came in?
I mean, we definitely had different styles. So I'm a lot more forceful about all the things I'm doing because when I'm seeing engage, I'm just going for it. Sometimes I struggle with the fact that I have to communicate about it, but like, so what I'm used to, and that's something that's like distinctive between, I think, EU and NA, it's like kind of a difference, is that usually in EU you have like really everyone takes care of themselves first, right? And then they play towards. Whereas in NA it's like team first. So everything that is like team first is basically like the communication pattern has to be laid down, then like the engage pattern has to be laid out, and everyone like kind of understands like like whatever I could be going for. Whereas in EU it's like everyone is already aware of that and is already ready for it, and then goes for the team play, if that makes sense. So it was kind of like badly explained, but I guess it's like in NA you're ready as a team first before you become a good individual, and in EU you're good individually and then you become a team. So, and I think that's kind of like the distinctive styles that I think we clashed upon, like in the beginning, where I looked for engages at certain times when people were not ready because I was not communicating about it. They were not ready for it because like they didn't have the groundwork laid out. Whereas in EU, that would have been like, okay, individuals make that play together because they already have the groundwork laid out by themselves, if that makes sense.
Okay. Right, Loco, since obviously you worked with Amazing, like I said, it was a long, long time ago. What was Amazing like when you actually had him as your jungler for that one split?
Oh man, Amazing was very opinionated. Amazing knew exactly what he wanted, and he, despite like being very rough around the edges, he was one of the better teammates on TSM. Because when you like think of Amazing, I guess a lot of people think of like some of the rants and some of like the Twitter fight. But he was the first one to really reach out to Lustboy and get him incorporated within the team. I think it's really easy to get the wrong image of Amazing. Oh, he's someone that's brash. He's just someone that does what he wants. But like outside of that, like when it really counts and when people do need him, like he's there as a teammate. And
did you have a good relationship with him? Did he ever flame you?
Oh, no, it was always up and down. I will say our relationship was up and down, but it was also always very honest. Like we were very backstabby with each other. Like if I had a problem with Amazing, I would publicly say it. Amazing, if he had a problem with me, he would publicly say it. And we both defended each other online against like other people in the afterwards. So I would like to think we have a good relationship.
No, I mean, during the time, like especially during my TSM split, there was a like insane amount of issues that we had. Like, I mean, we don't even mention those because I think Loco kind of has like a more private view on that front. But no, it's like I always try to be honest with my teammates and try to be like just telling them what I think they should be doing. They should tell me the same, because for me it's like maybe I'm naive, maybe I'm just dumb. Like that could be too. But I like if someone has like any kind of back thoughts, I am not gonna really like, or like the thoughts that they are not really expressing, I'm not gonna second guess them. You know, like it's for me. There's no point. I don't have the time for it. If someone doesn't tell me something, then they just never meant it. You know. So
sure. You don't have to guess. They have to actually come to you if they've got an issue.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Is that actually different to how other people were in TSM then, Loco? Because like obviously, to be fair, people only know from all those reality shows. But in most of the reality show aspects, seems like at least a whole bunch of people in the team were more quiet players who didn't want to necessarily confront everything in public. You know.
I think it's just generally with everyone when you're really young and you don't really have a lot of social experience and you don't have time spent away from your family, like people interact in really different ways. So even if you're really feeling something, like maybe in the social setting, like you don't feel like you can speak up, but you can speak to someone else like one-on-one. So not everyone was as vocal as Amazing was about what they thought were problems on the team, how they felt about each other. So yeah, but I don't think that's like an exclusively a TSM thing. I think that happens with pretty much any situation where you have like 5 young 20-somethings or late teenagers in the same house, like trying to work on something together.
I thought amazing, being as obviously like TSM's in the playoffs, they're a team we're going to discuss on the show anyway. I thought a topic we could actually discuss with you in a unique way is we were going to discuss anyway the fact that they've made this jungle change and they brought Spica in, who only played at the very end of the split, and they basically, you know, if you look at how they've done, where they're not taking any of the other junglers, they're making it actually pretty clear that like this guy just has to play now. He is just the jungler, and they've abandoned the Acadian grid experiment completely for now. Well, obviously you were a jungler in TSM, and it is a famous narrative around TSM that for some reason when the junglers join their team, it doesn't matter how aggressive they are, it doesn't matter if they were some mechanical god before, whatever, even no matter what champions they played, a lot of them seem to end up in a similar kind of position. They seem to become a similar type of jungler, and I've seen very interesting speculations made over the years. And part of the problem was it wasn't until the last couple of years that anyone in TSM even vaguely would admit there was any sort of an issue. It seemed like they were sort of in denial in a way. So in your era, it didn't seem like they had these problems. I mean, as we described, someone who's a pretty self-directed person, you know, and you're not just going to sit back and, I don't know, get into a scenario where you have to second guess what the other guy's doing. You're just going to say it directly. So as an outsider, but somebody who's been within TSM, do you have any thoughts on this trend? Like, would you acknowledge it is a thing first?
I mean, I think it may have not been there long enough, but I do think that, at least for me, I went against the trend. So when I came in, I was actually pretty passive. I was used to a really distinct system in Copenhagen Moors where we played early game through Forgiven, then level 5, level 6, I would just make a play top lane, and that would be about it. Like, I didn't really do anything in the early game besides like one distinctive gank. And when I came over to NA, actually Loco and Reginald really had to teach me the game. I didn't know about level 3 ganks mid lane. I just didn't do it because EU didn't do it, so I didn't do it. I was not that aggressive. I was just mechanically really good. So when I came in, they kept sitting me down, showed me Korean bots, like told me how I should play. And it actually changed a lot throughout the split. I went from being a passive jungler who didn't gank early game to a really aggressive jungler who then maybe even overgank. So I think the narrative, at least for my era, doesn't quite fit. But I do think that once like the jungle cycle continued, right? Like I was supposed to be on at least until 2015. Then Centurion came in and he was really aggressive. He had his own distinct issues. Then Svenskrim came in. I think for the first year, they tried really hard to make everything work. I think the second year is when they kind of had a really similar like direction to G2 at that very moment. When G2 had like 2016, they had like an insane year. They won both splits. Trig was a godlike jungler. Then 2017 came around. Trig just completely fell off and didn't really play well anymore. And Svenskrim kind of had the same trajectory where I think it was actually more due to the style changes within the game that made junglers play differently. And also the fact that once you go through like, let's say a year of being a really good team, right? It's really hard to not get complacent nor to basically not rely on your other team member. So what I mean by that is like, so for example, when I watched Svenskrim in 2017 and Trick, they were relying on other members in the team. They were not relying on themselves to basically carry the game anymore. They were basically given, honestly, like, how to put this? They were given agency to other people instead
I'll
of
give
like
you an
taking
example. Like actually, I remember Kelsey Moser did an article on this topic, and one of the observations she'd come up with basically when Svenskeren was in TSM was like, I think she'd even literally gone through by hand and like tracked the stats for this. But like basically, the only way he would get to do like a blue invade or something is if Bjergsen pushed up the lane and actually like roamed with him to some degree and had priority in the lane. If he didn't, he could just never get it done. So like it's kind of ties into what you're saying here. At this point in time, Svenskaren's whole game is based on what's happening with lane priority in a lane. So it isn't like the old Svenskeren. If you remember in Europe, he used to be amazing at just, no pun intended, obviously, amazing at invading, of dueling the other jungler. He was a classic for that, right?
Mm-hmm. No, he was really good. Like, and in 2017, he was still one of the better junglers. It was not like the narrative was still like it was always there. And I do think that he became a lot less aggressive over the year. But like that's so natural, even for me when I was in Origin 2015 versus 2016, right? In 2015, I tried to make aggressive plays all the time and like made sure that I get the level 3 player off that maybe shouldn't work out in a lot of games, but does work out because my team is just better. And in 2016, like when you look at the beginning, we became kind of complacent. We didn't play as well. And then like I became a lot worse. I didn't make the aggressive play anymore because I didn't trust like myself to make the good play, and I trusted others to make plays for me and make sure, like, was sure that they're going to carry me to a certain extent. So the complacency part for Svenskeren too, I think may have been something that is just like you trust other people too much, and thus you're losing because you're not actively trying to win the game anymore.
Sure.
One thing I want to add on to that regarding like the TSM jungle stuff. So some teams play very, very systematic. So when I coached TSM and a little bit after hearing from other people that worked within TSM, they kept and improved on like being very systematic. When we have a lead, we need to make sure we have this priority. We need to make sure we have this kind of vision set up, and then we can go for this blue buff and bait. Like blue buff and bait is like a very bread and butter part of TSM's gameplay. And for some teams, like they don't have that. They're like, if you feel like we can go for this, if I feel like I have a timing, I'm going to call for this and we're going to go. So in TSM, like as Amazing said, like they would only do stuff like when they had certain kind of priority. And I think like that is like a key part of the whole TSM junglers are passive is they have a system in how they do things. And when the check marks aren't checked off, they don't go for it, where other junglers will go by feel a lot. Like, and especially on teams where junglers are the primary shot callers and they have the biggest voices, like they'll call for stuff without like there being like concrete information on we can 100% do this. It's more of I feel like we can do this because of information that I've gathered.
What are your thoughts on it though, Loco? Like, what's your take on the jungle situation?
It's a little bit of what I just said, and also every jungler that comes into TSM, like probably will never admit it, but it's like, oh man, I get to play with Bjergsen. Like, oh man, TSM had such a history of success. I can just listen and learn and be a part of it. I would imagine that way, maybe not for you, Amazing, but for players like Centauran and even players like Sven who didn't have a lot of success before coming onto TSM. Like, I would have to imagine they played more of a secondary part than like being a primary voice, and they listened and they try to fit into the system a lot than bringing on, hey, this is how I played and I want to continually play this way.
I mean, honestly, at least when I look at the last years, I think the jungle choice were just not ideal. Like the people that they chose for the jungle role were just not ideal. But I also think that like overall, it feels like that the playstyle, the systematic playstyle, right, that we talked about, is something that doesn't really apply anymore. You cannot cross off every check mark anymore. So in a lot of ways, like especially in last years, like when you cannot just play on if perfect conditions apply, we're gonna go for the play. You have to go from a 60-40 place, and that's something that like has been a huge style change for a lot of players, not just for TSM, but
Sure.
like Bjergsen is someone like, at least when I played with him, he's really systematic, but he's also really good when those systems apply. So it makes sense for TSM to have a jungle issue, especially in last years, because the game has become a lot more random. So I don't think it's a real TSM issue. I think it's honestly just an issue of a lot of players that are really controlled. Mythi had a struggle too in TSM. Then other players that used to be really controlled like fell out the system completely. Like Yellowstar, like who used to be really controlled, he's out now. So a lot of players that
the funny thing is, as you say, it's also happened with the supports, who, by the way, were all famous shot callers. So we had Yellowstar, then we had Mythi, now we have Smoothie. Smoothie was like the main shot caller on Cloud9 when he used to be there. So we're seeing a similar breakdown from another position that in theory should have a lot of agency within the team.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it is just like the overall system that they're running, that it's too systematic for the actual game right now, and that may be the issue or the reason for the downfall. Because even Sven, like, I mean, kind of fits that whole thing too, where he's a really controlled player, but that doesn't work as well anymore. So I think it's more about that the people that they choose, and obviously the overarching coaching staff and the overarching like playstyle that they kind of possess and have been like using for years is not working anymore.
What are your thoughts, then, for both of you, on the fact that, like, it's one thing if you change the player, like say this is the end of the split, and for next split you're bringing in a young Rocky and he's going to get his chance. That's totally different from at the end of the split, subbing someone in and then literally saying, not only are you going to play the playoffs, but I'm even going to take away the safety net. Like, we can't even sub the other guys in. You're just it for real, you know. Like, you have to be, like, basically, if you're Spica, it doesn't matter how you feel yourself, you must perform in the playoffs now, because there's no way out, you know. So what do you think of that approach?
Do you want to
go? It's definitely
first?
bold. So what do you
think? What do you think, Loco?
Trial by fire, and so much pressure on Spica. Like, first time playing in LCS playoffs, you're playing for TSM. all eyes are going to be on you. Like amazing, or not amazing, Acadian can't come in, Grit can't come in if you fuck up.
I mean, amazing can't come in either.
Can't come
Like, oh man. And also it just reeks of desperation, and it reeks of we don't have confidence in what we built over the course of summer. Not just course of summer, course of spring. Like, can you imagine Acadian's positioning? He gets a miracle shot in spring split to start for TSM because Grig has an injury, takes TL to game 5, and a lot of people say TSM should have won, and then TSM doesn't have confidence in you to make you the sole starter. You split time with Grig, and then both of you guys struggle throughout the season, and then TSM eventually deems you the starter, and not even 2 weeks after they deem you the starter, they don't put you on the roster for playoffs. It's a roller coaster, and who can have confidence like in themselves? And I don't know, it's just not a good situation, and it reeks of desperation. I haven't gotten to see internally how TSM's doing with Spica or with Acadian, so maybe I can't make that call. I've only seen 2 games of Spica during the last week, and I guess like 20 games of Acadian throughout the year, and they have so much more data, and that's the conclusion they came to. But externally, like looking in, this is desperate, this is... I don't have a lot of good things to say about it.
I mean, I just hope that Acadian has a good coping mechanism, because if I was in that spot, like, I would have either left the team by myself, I would have just told them, like, straight up, I'm not going to do this anymore. Like, or, like, make sure that, I don't know how his contract is either. Maybe gets paid a shit ton, like, sitting on the bench and he's chilling. But if I was in this spot, I would have been, like, really, really adamant about them making a call earlier and, like, make it definite. You know, like, it cannot be that they just jump around. Honestly, like, I feel bad for the guy, because he's actually not bad. He's actually a decent jungler within the meta right now.
He's an LCS level player, of course.
He could be top 5, top 6, like, easily. So I don't even see why you would exchange him. And I think maybe he just does some unforced errors, which we've seen in the past, like, and that doesn't fit, like, TSM style. Because I do think that Spica, at least over the 2 games that I've seen him, and, like, seems to be a little bit more controlled, where he doesn't really go for the aggressive play. He's kind of like nurtured, if that makes sense. Like, he doesn't even have agency, just follows around. Maybe he's bringing it over the next couple of weeks and he's actually becoming like a more energetic player. But so far, what I've seen is basically just filling the role of Ottoman. I don't see anything else out of him. So maybe that's something they want, because they want the games to be more controlled and scale into late game. But I wonder how it's going to be against aggressive teams that are able to punish this kind of like lack of early game that they have right now, because Acadian is actually a really good early game jungler. Yeah. And I would use them in this meta more so than I would use Spica. That's just my...
A little bit of adding on to that regarding Acadian being a good sport. Like about 2 hours ago, before they started playing Golden Guardians Academy in playoffs, like he tweeted, "Hey, I've been practicing with I've been practicing with TSM Academy this week. Let's go slap some ass. Like, come watch us play Golden Guardians Academy." He's being a really good sport about all this, not like...
Yeah, that Twitter means a lot. Yeah, I agree.
But it is one of the only outward-facing like things like he can say and do. So it does carry some weight with it.
Yeah, but I'm with the Mason on this one. Like, I think it's kind of bullshit the way they treated him, because the key thing there to me is that angle of like, if you don't think I'm good enough to be the jungler, why am I starting in these games now? That doesn't make sense to me in that scenario. Like the idea that you're going to be on trial every game you play, like I don't think that's going to help someone who isn't an established top player. Like, it's probably going to destroy their mentality completely. And the reason I hate moves like that is because I feel like it actually makes it easier to scapegoat that guy when he then fails the trial. It's like you set him up to an impossible task. Like, oh, you're already having some issues. In fact, our team has issues with jungle. We're going to let you keep playing. But basically, the signal we're sending you is the second you do badly, the Grig guy's in. So it's like, great. So now it's all on me if I do badly in the game. That's going to be in your head half the time, I'm sure. And then also, when they bring the Spica guy in, what makes this so different to a normal move is, so for example, when 100 Thieves took out Ryu and they put Saligo in, right, that at least makes sense, because if they think Ryu isn't good enough, there's only one person you can try out, which is the guy who's the academy player at that point in time. Yeah. Since they already had a guy who was a sub in Grig and should have been the original starter, and they tried him as well, when you then remove all of those players, that means at no point in time did they ever actually think Spica was the better jungler Loco. That signals just to them that they don't think it can possibly work with the other two. That's all it means. If they must have had this guy the whole time. They could have tried him between the splits. I bet they probably even have watched him in academy. But to me, it's less that they think he's good and that they just thought the other two couldn't work, which is kind of a drastic thing to do at the very end of the split, even though I sort of get it, because the logic, I assume, is, well, if we have to go through the gauntlet, we're going to have to win loads of matches anyway. So if we really think that it doesn't work with the other two, just gamble on the last guy.
Yeah, I think more so than anything, I think beginning of summer, not starting with Acadian and trying to make right by Grig, because Grig was supposed to be the original starter in spring, and like giving him a chance to try out versus Acadian was the biggest mistake. Like, as you guys said, like, the treatment of Acadian is what's really fucking with him and what's really not okay, and just giving him the chance to start in summer would have fixed a lot of the problem for this team, like one way or the other.
I mean, like when you have when you're still madly in love with another girl, and like you have a new girlfriend, you're trying it out, you're like not sure whether or not it's gonna work, and you just have your ex still on speed dial. That's how it feels like with Acadian, like it's like he's not supposed. I feel like he wasn't supposed to be on TSM in the first place, and then they just were desperate and got him. But when he actually proved himself, like, I don't know if they never changed their opinion of him ever, and which is really concerning to me, because like, I mean, I'm a fellow player that used to, like, I was cut from one team, right, from Fnatic, and like I was in a really similar spot where I knew I had someone in the background. I knew I was like kind of coaching this guy, and then I get cut because I'm speaking up to the coaching staff, So for me, that was like, I can connect with this guy, because like for me, it's like a really similar situation I used to be in, and you should never put your player in any kind of situation like that. Don't put anyone on, like, everyone knows that the spot could be in danger potentially. Everyone should know that, but you shouldn't play with someone's, like, honestly, confidence, like, as a player and as a person, and that's Acadian, especially as someone that I think is really confidence based. Like, you're just destroying the guy, and like, I would be surprised if I ever saw this guy like play on a high level again, like next year.
Sure, that could be a traumatic event to happen for sure.
Yeah. Hypothetical
I'll
question.
even throw in as well, by the way, here's another reason why I think it's fucked up and they did him dirty. It's because even though, listen, I'll totally admit, yeah, they had problems at that position. They were looking for solutions. Okay, that wasn't the only position they had problems at, though. Where was Sven getting subbed out of the game? Where was Broken Blade getting subbed out of the game? None of these guys get subbed out if they throw the whole fucking game, if they mess up a matchup, if they fail to do what they were supposed to do in practice. So, like, I also think it's unfair in that regard. Like, I get that, obviously, you don't have subs for all those positions that you necessarily want to bring in, but you are treating one player totally different than the other players in your team. So, like, there's even more pressure that, like why does he get to have extra pressure than other people? It feels unfair to me, at least.
Doesn't it come with name value? The name value that Sven carries, the name value that Broken Blade carries. Like, people might not know, but Broken Blade was a really hype prospect in Turkey, and LEC teams were looking at him too. Like, so Broken Blade is a really hyped up rookie. Sven is someone with a lot of success behind him, where Acadian is just Acadian. That's why they were so willing to sub him out, and that's why they were so
Here's
willing.
what I would say. I've got a very quick answer for you on this one, Loco. If Acadian was just Acadian, what the fuck was he doing being the jungle starter for a team that claims they want to win worlds?
Cause Grig had an injury, so they're like, this is going to be something temporary.
You missed the point, Loco. Why is he coming into this split then if he's not a player that they deem highly? That's my point. If they themselves never adjusted and thought after spring, he's a good player, look, he took us to finals, then why start him at all? It's like, I have this philosophy, I made this point to you, I can't remember if it was on the other episode that we did, but I have a philosophy generally that one of the things I respect about certain owners, Steve's a good one from Team Liquid, Carlos from G2, is they are willing to upgrade even when they had the really good result. Like, if they had a really good result, but at this moment they look at their roster and say, even though that team was really good, I actually maybe could get an even better jungler, or could maybe get an even better support. If they think that then means they might win even more in the future, they'll do it. They won't have like sentimental attachment and go, well, I've got to give that guy another chance because he did well. It's like, no, they're kind of cutthroat in a way, but in a way that I think makes sense because you see the results that can come from doing it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you should be cutthroat with everyone on a team or with no one. Those are the two options. There's no other way. You can't just pick and choose. You're just destroying a guy, or you're making the wrong moves. Because in the end, I do agree with you throwing that. Like, if I was in TSM spot and I would have thought that like Mr. Acadian wasn't good enough, I would have just cut him off a spring split, or at least give him that notice.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
That'd be it.
I'd even say, by the way, Loco, and obviously a lot of this is in hindsight, and it's easy for us to say now that we know how it turned out, whereas they were still hoping it'd go well. But I'd even say, if they were really smart, the ruthless move you do is this, Loco. After the spring split, if you really decided internally, Not sure about Acadian. We had a good result, but not sure if I want him going forwards. Tell you what, his value for the rest of the league was sky high. That's where you make the gangster move. You trade him for someone else in the league.
Then Amazing wouldn't have a job. That's 100 Thieves would have been looking like crazy after spring, after what happened.
Yeah, maybe. But the problem there is I'm saying, like, make a trade, though. Like, find someone else you maybe want to... Like, maybe, for example, I don't know, maybe you go crazy and get, like, contracts or something. I mean, my joke there would be, at this point in time, GGS should actually pay TSM to let contracts play for half a split, get ruined, so he stops doing all those stupid engages where he kills himself early in the game. Then he can come back to GGS, fully broken by Bjergsen. Froggen will go, cheers. Oh, you've broken him in for me, have you? Right? Doesn't piss on the couch anymore. Brilliant, right?
Jesus
and then he comes in. And we want a jungler like that in GGS, so come on over to our team.
There's another aspect to the TSM playoff situation that we didn't even touch. The fact that they didn't bring in Grig and Acadian, I think partly has to do with them not having confidence in Grig and Acadian, but it also has to do with them not having confidence in their bot lane. Because the other subs are Tactical and Treats, so they have sub for bot lane. So I actually think that played a part. So
I don't know what Reginald's doing right now, because remember, Reggie came in again, amazing. He did one of his classic moves where, he comes in at the last minute to try and fix things. And this move right now is like, basically, is everyone just on trial now? Is this like an audition to just keep your job for next year? What the fuck? I thought we were trying to win LCS. What the fuck is this?
TSM has like 5 coaches right now. They have Tony as head coach, Andy, CEO/coach, Goldman, he's Tony's assistant coach, Lustboy, and then I guess like I'm Parsa's general man. Oh, Peter Zhang. So they have 5 coaches and then plus Far.
Yeah, that's too many. That's all I'm saying.
I mean, there is that saying, in English, too many cooks spoil the broth, Loco. There's too many people in there. Yeah. They're all going like, oh, I'm doing it. And then Reggie just comes in. He doesn't even know they're making a lasagna. And he's just like, right, put the Pasco hot sauce on here. You got to have a lot of fire in the game. And also we're going to up the temperature. Anyone who doesn't, if you don't like the heat, get the fuck out the kitchen. Like, what's he doing with his analogy here?
I mean, yeah.
I think here's the thing. Yeah. I know there's been a lot of times where TSM's come in looking rough to the playoffs and they've done it anyway. They've gone to the finals, they've had a great run, etc. I realise this has been said many times before, but this feels like the time it doesn't happen. This feels like the one that's the end.
I mean, I think people say this every split.
It's happening a lot, I will say.
No, but so one thing about Reggie is that, like, I think what he does is actually the right thing to do, but for the wrong reasons. So I think in the beginning, like when you do these things, right, like you're basically not trusting the rest of the coaching staff and the rest of your players to fix their shit. Like, that's basically what he's like signaling, right? So I think in the beginning of the split, I don't know how involved he was in making that roster, but I don't think he was that involved. I think it was more on the Parthelina side.
Parthelina, Tony,
yeah. And I think in a lot of ways they should have just been more adamant about spending more money for better players and spending more for like best players like that they can get, right? You cannot always build a roster from nothing. It doesn't work that way. So, and I think this year at least what I've been feeling is that they try to build this from nothing. Like Brokenblade obviously is a huge talent, but you didn't know how he's going to turn out. Acadian, you had zero idea how it's going to turn out. Like Bjergsen is stable, then you have Sven who's a stable, like even Smoothie up and down, So basically the idea behind this, like, if you want a top tier roster, you have to have a top tier approach, and that's something where you talked about Carlos and like Steve. Like, they are willing to spend like millions and millions. They're willing to do whatever it takes to win, and they should do that the same for TSM if they want to stay true to the name brand, right? Because for me, and like obviously I have a personal affiliation still with them because like it was my first really big team. When I came in, it was like this. Like TSM is a team that has the highest brand value in North America. There's no one above them, and people will fight to get on the roster.
We'll take pay cuts.
And I think take pay cuts. And I think we've come to the point where that's not happening anymore. And I think they just haven't caught up yet. Like, I don't know what it is, but like TSM doesn't have the same feel to me anymore than it used to. Like, I used to be like fond of TSM, be like, oh, this is my first team. I'm really happy if they're succeeding. Like now it feels like it's so far away from that there's no connection. There's no personal connection anymore. This TSM is a completely different TSM than it used to be.
I have to say as well, by the way, along another line, like that's something else to discuss, Loco, is Reginald even coming in. Because here's the problem with this scenario. I totally get every single time he's ever stepped in why he did it. Because as far as I can tell, he's right. There was problems in the team and they lacked, maybe like a leadership voice or someone who could get everyone in line. So he comes in, he thinks, right, well, I can do that. It's still, obviously, you're going to do it more in the second split anyway. You want to also get to Worlds. It's a big deal for your org. The problem is this, and I even told him this publicly and privately in the past. I told him this. It's like what I said about the Acadian move before. You're actually showing that you yourself didn't make a judgment if you step in like that. Like if you think Zix is the right coach, then let him coach. And if he fails, then he failed and he's not the right coach. Don't have him for next year. And what I don't understand is this is the move that will make no sense to me. If Reggie steps in now, and no matter what happens, whether they win, whether they lose, if next year he then has Zix as the main coach again, I don't get what the point of stepping in now was. Again, you see my point? It's like shit or get off the pot. It's like either you believe in him and you're going to let it happen, or if you don't believe in him, then let him fully fail and know that it was the wrong choice. Because if I was Zix, no matter what happens now, it's kind of like, well, I never really got to do what I wanted to do fully because you stepped in. So you've been in that position, Loco. It doesn't work either way for the person, right?
The thing is, I feel like Tony performed his ass off in spring. Like bringing that roster to Game 5 versus TL is not an easy job at all. Like we can shit on them for what happened in summer, but Tony performed in spring. Like I feel like Tony deserves the respect from what he's done before on CLG and then also what he's shown on TSM. And to take that away from Tony in summer is just a little questionable.
I'd even add on to what Amazing said. Like, I personally think if you look at their lineup, the first problem I think they have is just the roster. Like, I think some of the players just aren't good enough or maybe don't fit together. So that isn't the coach's fault. Like, he's not a miracle worker. He can't make Sven just go back in time 3 years and be fucking Sven from OG or something. He's just the player he is now.
I mean, I don't, as I said, I don't think that Reggie, like in Loco kind of talk about too, like that, I don't think Reggie was that involved. So, like, I can see it from his perspective, and I would probably do, if I was an owner, I would probably do the same thing if I was him. Like, he should, maybe he made the mistake of not, he should have distanced himself completely or not at all from the very get-go, right?
Yes.
But once he, that was his first mistake. But now he realized that, honestly, the roster is not as good, or, like, we're not performing as well as we should, and he's trying to come in and, like, bring his knowledge. Like, if it was my baby, I'll do the same, So I can kind of understand him now, but, like, I think the first mistake is either like put in like more resources, do whatever it takes to win, or like step in from the very get-go and just do it yourself. Like, and I think Reggie is actually capable of doing it himself. Like when he was coaching us too with Loco, like, I mean, the amount of work this guy put in, like the amount of work that Loco put in at that point, like was actually crazy. Like I don't know how much Reggie slept during that bootcamp in Korea, but like he slept like 2 to 3 hours every night, like watched Korean VODs the whole night, and then like taught us in the morning and taught us the whole day, and then slept another 2 hours, So his work ethic, like I think it's more about the inspiration that he brings to the team to actually get to the same level as he does. So, same amount of commitment to TSM, but again, TSM now is not the same TSM that it used to be, simply because of Reggie's absence. That's what I'm feeling.
Okay. Right, let's talk about some of the other teams then. Mm-hmm. So, right, first of all, Amazing, just to give us your perspective on it, right? Your team was one of the teams who coming in was in this battle for the playoffs. And I actually, personally, I thought your team might make it because like your macro looked a lot better in the last few weeks. But in the end, it was Optic and shockingly Clutch, actually, who did this ridiculous run back to get all the way in the playoffs. So, like I said before, you would have actually... I mean, the problem is, even though I say you were in the tiebreakers, when you finish like the way this season finishes, I'm sure the first thought is just all the games that you could have won earlier in the split to make yourself have the one game to get in, right? It's not just the last game. So how do you look at it? Because you're obviously disappointed on Twitter. If you even start 0-5 and then you get a shot at the playoffs, it has to feel like it can happen. It feels like you've run it back, the miracle story. So what was it like? What were the issues you think that held you back from the playoffs this time?
I mean, obviously... Like, I think that we didn't quite evolve the way that I thought was right for the team, or like that we should have evolved. Like, it was not even my opinion, but it's more like I think our shot calling system like was in place, but it never really took off. So I'm someone that's in the same boat as TS, like as Björksen, for example. I like to have things get controlled, but I've also admitted to myself, like in the last couple of years, that game has become a lot more random. I have to become a lot more. So I think we never got to the point where we had a solid foundation groundwork. Because like we kept having weird issues coming in, like sometimes champion pool issues, sometimes this like that issue, like, and it never felt like we truly came together as a team, which in the end like made it so we were weaker in certain matchups against certain teams. So for example, a team like CG Clutch, like is able to take us apart. Like they're not that great, but they're really good at abusing individual mistakes, especially when a team is not cohesive. So the way you beat them is like you're a team and you just face them up in mid lane at some point and you just aim them down with a better comp. And that's how you win against CG. It's not that hard, but if you don't lay the groundwork in the beginning of the game where you screw up a lot of things, like you will lose against them because they will take you apart. Lyra with his jungle clears, like, and then Huni 1v1 matchups, like they would do something and they win the game through that. So yeah, I just feel like that we never established quite right groundwork with one another, and then maybe on players as well as coaching staff together, like that all of us just didn't synergize as well as we should, and we never made it to the point that I was hoping to be at, like similar to Schalke, And Schalke was like, this is my idea, do this, and we'll succeed. And then like we did the changes that were necessary in order to get to that point, and especially like Idioto and like me and like obviously the whole team like really synergizing well together made it so we got to the finals. And I think we never got to that point in this year.
What do you think, Loco? What was the 100 Thieves problems?
I really like what Amazing said. Like versus Clutch, I actually think it showed a lot of problems with 100 Thieves, where Clutch is such a sporadic team and they'll do random shit. Like as he talked about with Huni, with Lyra, with Demonte. If you aren't ready for the random shit they do, you'll get picked apart and then they'll blow up the game from there. Where 100 Thieves, if the game got to a state in mid and late game, where it got to team fighting, where it got to decision making, where it got to setting up around objective, 100 Thieves were really good. There were teams in the league that did that better than 100 Thieves, like TL, CLG, C9, but beyond the teams below that, if they were in that state versus 100 Thieves, then 100 Thieves would win. But the problem is teams like Clutch can make sure 100 Thieves doesn't get to that state and they'd be able to blow them apart. So yeah, they were kind of the inverse of Clutch, and it showed. And Clutch was able to step up and play their playstyle and throw 100 Thieves off. Like we talk about 100 Thieves, like they had to play the tiebreakers versus Optic, and then they lost that, and then they didn't get to play Golden Guardians. But I think the real match that really mattered for 100 Thieves was the one versus Clutch, and then
even the week before the GGS one.
Yeah, I think those were way more important, and it showed the kind of flaws and the strengths of 100 Thieves.
Yeah, that was the infuriating thing. Is like Loco said there, the actual like fundamentals that the team had looked pretty good by the end. And obviously, if you hadn't have had that terrible early split record of 0-5, you wouldn't even be in this position. You could probably already have been a playoff team. But that's the other thing. It's like even though you had some amazing wins over top teams, like even the win against CLG to get into the tiebreaker scenario was a pretty good game, but it was too many losses to the bad teams in theory that cost you really.
No, yeah, for sure. Like I think if we had more preparation together, I think it would have been different, because like I'm someone that needs time to ramp up. Like every single split that I play, like I'm probably not that good in the beginning. At the end, I'm really good, and then I usually get my team to the point where I'm like, okay, we're at least a contender, or we're at least like a top 4 team. We're probably gonna make it to the finals. I think we didn't have the ramp up time necessary for me, honestly. And I think Loco talked about another episode, like where he when he talked about me too, I'm someone that has to create a system to a certain extent, And I think I need to create a system, because I don't think that it would be weird if someone else created the system for me, because if I'm within someone else's system, someone else has to take responsibility for me, right? So if I'm playing, like if someone else, like for example, Afro created the system, then he would have to take full responsibility at all times. But if I create the system, the responsibility is on me. So if I fail, the team fails, but I usually don't like to fail. So I'm making sure that that's not gonna happen. So I hate it when I defer responsibility to someone else and make him the sole source of engages playmaking, and I'd rather have it be myself that fails, and in case I fail, then we just don't make it. So I don't think that this team wasn't quite my team, but we're on the verge to basically have me and Afro come build together to have it be our team. But the ramp up time was long.
The other thing that I think is brutal as well is I also think the style and the strengths that your team ended up having would have actually been better in the playoffs in best of 5 than in best of 1s. And if you look at the teams, if you'd have just snuck in that you would have been playing, it would have been TSM or CLG. Those are actually teams you matched up pretty well with.
Yeah, I mean,
pretty interesting series.
Don't remind me. Don't remind me. Like I'm actually kind of mad about. I'm not even sad about it anymore, because when you really just lose, you're sad. But now I'm just mad because I can't do anything to fix it right now. Sure. I have 3 months off season, so the only thing I can do is hang around, play some edits. Oh god, can't even play an SO. It doesn't even work. So what I'm going to do, watch other teams play, and then hope that I can pick up some knowledge and not get further behind, because like every time people go to Worlds, they pick up new knowledge, they pick up the new meta, and then they bring it into next season, So like I'm not going to be in that spot, and I'm envious of people that are.
I have a quick question for you, just as a piece of trivia, right? Being early in your career, you were actually most famous for mechanics. It was like obviously your Lee Sin, etc., was pretty famous.
Lee Classic.
How come that's part of the narrative in the last few years? Is like the area people criticize you the most is they think your individual skills are pretty bad.
I think it's because of solo queue and scrims, honestly. So I think when I have time to ramp up and honestly like just get into the right rhythms within the game, I think then my mechanics become really clean. For example, against Fnatic like last year, like in the final, it's like there was not one, like the whole series I didn't make a mechanical mistake, which is like something that doesn't really usually happen for a lot of players, but like I need time to ramp up, and I think that people overestimate how much solo queue actually means and how much like junglers are actually interacting with lanes in an actual game, right? For example, when I play solo queue, I interact with lanes probably like 10 minutes a game, right? Because I keep ganking, I keep killing. And I get invaded, I invade, that kind of stuff. In a professional game, you have maybe like 2 to 3 minutes of actual interaction between jungle and laners and like other champions. So the only thing you have to be like mechanically efficient at is like engages. So, and I think the narrative comes from like, oh, I see these montages of this player, like he's doing so much great shit in solo queue, then he's like high elo too. And honestly, it doesn't matter. Like for a jungle position, it doesn't matter. For me, it's like you need 2 to 3 minutes of solid engages and then you win the game. So, and I think I've become like more so someone that ramps up over the split, tries to be mechanically efficient, rather than someone that like tries to be flashy all the time. Maybe it has cost some mechanics, and I do think that I've become mechanically worse, because in season 4, I was probably like top 1, top 2 in the West, like in terms of like jungle mechanics. But now I'm like definitely not top 1, not top 2. So I think it has cost me a bit, but I do think it has come. And that expense has come at a good fortune, which is basically me able to direct teams in a more proper manner, where I don't have to be edgy, whatever it is. I can just be myself and operate and help the team win.
Do you think NA has a different philosophy on how junglers work than Europe?
Yeah, completely different. So NA, it's really the junglers help the lanes and do this and that and do this. The junglers are basically like, they're just,
I know the word you want to use.
Yeah, they're the dog, right? You call, hey, Fido, come on, boy. And then he comes along, oh, there he is. Good lad. There you go, a little treat.
Yeah, I mean, kind of. I was going to use a different word, but sure. Yeah. But yeah,
also refers to a dog.
So that's how junglers in A operate, where like Wiggly is the prime example. Like Wiggly is, like, you thought of him as bad, but like within the NM meta, he's actually really good. He's one of the top junglers because he's able to facilitate his lanes and make everyone like play to a certain way. But, and that's like basically the big but, is that EU junglers are a lot more self-sufficient, as are EU laners. Like, for example, in EU, there's little to no like instances where laner tells me you have to do this. It's more like like if it's like a really bad situation for them, if they really can't get out of it, then they call the jungler. Junglers are really basic part of laning within NA, and that makes the teams on average function on a completely different level than EU teams, where the team play comes together first and then the individual play will follow up with. And I think that's actually a downfall for a lot of NA teams, because it doesn't matter how good you are as a team. If a team is individually better than you, you're gonna lose. Like, it's just gonna happen in 9 out of 10 cases. So especially if they like even like have a good day, like mechanically they're just gonna outplay you in lanes and you're gonna be done for. And I think that's like kind of what I wish would be seen more in NA. And I think maybe due to the solo queue, maybe due to the scrim culture, maybe due to a lot of factors, but individuals have to come in and be good first before they come together as a team. It doesn't work any other way. If a bad player tells me he wants this and that, I would tell him no, because you're bad. It sounds stupid, but it makes sense, right? So like, because I know probably better than him within that certain moment, right, what his lane needs. And I think individuals have to get ready first, and then they can play with it. That's just how it is.
Okay.
I mean,
that definitely makes sense, by the way. I've always personally thought like junglers in pro sort of level should basically adopt the ruthless solo queue jungle ethic, which goes like this: like, if you fucked up your whole lane and it wasn't my fault, it wasn't like the fault of the team, you just did it yourself. It's like, if you're drowning, I can't come and help you. You drag me down with you. I have to go fucking help the guy who's not drowning, and we have to try and win through his lane now. Like, I know that's a very simplistic explanation, but there's some degree you have to do that sometimes in pro play.
Yeah, I mean, in NA, you lose and you just spam better jungle wins.
Yeah, I mean, okay, don't even trigger me. You know, like, there's so many, so there's so much that I despise about, like, I think it has actually to do more with the streamer culture that is predominant here. I think people are basically glorified memers. Like, everyone is just memeing in solo queue. No one is really trying. Like, because the incentive for anyone to try out in solo queue is not there. Like, why would I try out in solo queue? Like, what is the best I can get out of it? I can become a pro. There are 50 spots, like in the LCS. There are maybe 50 in the academy. And that's like whatever, you know. Like, you don't want to play academy if you're leaving college, whatever. So what is the actual incentive? Become a streamer. So why even bother becoming a good player if you can be a good memer and be someone that is like good at Teemo or whatever it is? You know, like, it's a funny champion. People watch that shit. So it sounds stupid, but I think the overall issue that like kind of like is behind that whole thing, that where like individuals don't become ready, is because there's no competition. Like, where's the competition? Like, no one is going to try to become a regional league player because there's no regional league here. EU has an incentive, and I wish NA had that, because then NA would be like, maybe within a vacuum of like having like 1.5 million players to 3 million players would be worse, but the distance between the individuals and the average level and the amount of imports that were necessary to elevate the level to a certain extent would not be that high anymore. And I think NA would be a lot better and looking a lot better than they actually are.
There's no way.
So what an unselfish guy he must be, right? He must have matured. He's basically just argued against him himself having a job. He wants them not to have to import as many players, for them to have their own.
I'm an A resident.
Oh, okay, right. So technically it's all right. Yeah, that's true.
I'm homegrown.
I forgot about that one, because that is the weird aspect, right? You got that like sort of loophole, because obviously when you go to Europe, there's no reason changing back, right?
Yep. Yeah, I almost changed it back accidentally. I was like, okay. And I sent a last minute email. Okay. I was like, oh, save my career, please.
It's lucky you didn't. Yeah, actually lucky, yeah.
Adding on to what Amazing said, there's no way to make a living competitively below academy in North America. You can go play for amateur teams. I mean, another way you can do it is college, but really you're taking a step back from your career and like you're hedging your bets.
I actually told someone this because I actually had a reporter from America who was like some regional reporter in, like, I think it's like Salt Lake City or something, who wanted to ask me about the concept of collegiate League of Legends. And basically the angle I sold her on it was, the reason it's good is it's not people have it the wrong way around. It's not that you're going to go to college, become a top college pro, and then become a pro like you would in American sports. I told her, no, it's the other way around. What's great about this is it means if you were a kid who was going to go to college anyway and you happen to be good at League of Legends, you can now maybe get a free ride instead of having to pay all the... That's the good angle to it, to me. I told her that's actually like a pretty cool angle. But as you say, the odds on you going from there to pro player, that's pretty unlikely at the moment, Loco.
And vice versa for Europe. If you don't play an academy, or if you don't play an LCS, there's so many ways you can still survive as a competitive player.
Not just survive, dude. Like, the French league, they pay a shit ton at this point. Like, the Spanish league, they pay a shit ton. Worst case, you go to Turkey.
You can definitely make money in Turkey if you want. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, like, it's... I mean, for me, it's like really sad to see, because I kind of understand why everyone is that way here. But it's like, I don't have... What can I do to fix it, you know? Like, the only thing I can do is to focus on my own career and figure out what I have to do for myself to stay good. And probably it's going to be boot camping in Europe again, like going back home, playing 2 months of solo queue, or going to Korea, like doing something about that. That's why you see so many boot camps here, and you rarely see boot camps besides like Fnatic that did it a couple of times in EU, where like they escape the country because they want to like have like an isolated practice experience with other teams. That's the incentive. But for a lot of NA teams, it's simply to play a better solo queue environment.
But anyway, let's do this. So we'll talk in a minute. What we'll do is like we'll leave the top teams because obviously they don't play this week anyway.
Yep.
So we'll talk about the matchups we have here. But the last team I wanted to talk about before we do that is one of the other eliminated teams, which is Golden Guardians, because they also were in a really good position to potentially make it through. Like they had the scenario same as under Thieves. It's like, as long as we don't lose all these last games and then the tiebreakers, we're fine. It's like, oh shit, we've just done that, yeah. But the difference is theirs is way worse, because if you saw these games, Loco, like, you know, in general, I personally am not someone who thinks you should just blame the draft first in every lost game. Like, I think it's kind of a cheap out. This is a rare example, mate, where I don't know what these coaches and Golden Guardians were thinking with some of the drafts. Like, one game, if anyone remembers, they decided to take Froggen, the main carry of the team, and make him play Karma, and then they had a fucking Victor in the bot lane, even though Victor is like one of Froggen's champions as well, on the fucking AD carry. And then another game, they played Tristana top lane and also some like wax. So they had some very weird concepts for the draft here, Loco. What did you think of Golden Guardians' failed attempt to make the playoffs? I think they don't deserve to, quite frankly, after what they did. So I don't have any issues with it at all.
I agree with you 100%. Their drafts were absolute fucking garbage. And the other ones that really stuck out to me was where they picked Braum, Ezreal. Oh, I really want to remember what this game was. They picked Lee for contracts, where they could have just taken Sejuani and made the draft so simple. Like, I really don't. I really don't understand this team. Like, you have, like, it's just play Sejuani Jarvan. Like, that's been the core part of meta for such a long time. And whenever you put a player on Lee and you don't have Engage or Tank or CC elsewhere, it makes it so difficult to execute, and it makes your comp so much harder to play. And they opt into it every single time. I really did not understand the drafting and the kind of direction that the Golden Guardians coaching staff and management set this year.
I mean, so I think they're trying to cater to everyone too much. I think that's what it is. So when I have a player, right, Contracts is like mechanically gifted, like he's good at game. Like, he's not mechanically bad, he's actually like good mechanically, he just has really bad like habits. So like sometimes like a player like that is gonna tell you, I really want to play Lee Sin this week. Lee Sin is such a good champion. Oh, I've been playing it a lot in solo queue. You know what you tell him? No. Like, that's it. End of conversation. And I think kind of like that, and I think Froggen is in the same boat, and it pains me to say this because I actually respect the guy for his success in the past, but I think that he falls into similar, where he's the same kind of player. Like, he may make it sound different, but he's the exact same kind of player. Where it's like, oh, Karthus is really good here, Anivia is really good here. Yeah, sure, but there are like 15 meta champions that are better than this.
He's pretty famous for being very stubborn about like what lane matchups he thinks are good, even if they aren't like the meta one.
Yeah, and like, I mean, they have too many players with bad habits, and I think them letting go, definitely, I don't know what the circumstances were, really hurt them. Like, definitely is a really good player. He drew target bans with the Draven, for example. Like, it was actually hard to play against him because he's not going to screw up once he's ahead. And I think they should have actually just like made sure they keep onto him and not put someone like FBI is not okay. Not to shit on FBI, but he's definitely not necessarily ready yet for every game. You know, like there'll be some games where he's good, some games where he's bad. You know, there's no consistency, and as an AD carry, you need consistency. Now definitely go who's basically one of the better players on that roster, and you're stuck in a position where you have to win the last couple of games with a kind of rookie player, and you're basically like a underperforming TSM, if that makes sense. You know, like so you have no base to go off.
A little bit on the contract versus Froggen thing. Like, I agree, both they're stubborn and both have their limitation, but I think you can win games playing Froggen style. Like, you can win games like playing Anivia, Vel'Koz, Karthus, whatever Froggen wants to play. I don't think contracts is good enough where you can win games like just enabling contracts.
When he locked in Lee Sin, like that's the point. In his team, right, I'm sure they were all going like, no, you know, like, this is possible. I've seen him carry on this before. Dude, the second I saw him lock Lee Sin in, I just got depressed because I was like, now he's going to start making players. Oh god, I don't want to see this. Please, no, I can't. No more players, please. Like, when contract starts making players, I'm like that fucking Goofy meme where I'm like the beaten kid on the floor and he's busting in the door like, time to make plays on Lee Sin. I'm like, no, contracts, please, before the queue goes in. It's like, I'm going in. It's like, fuck, this can't end well.
Place your bets in the right places. Like, you have Haunter, you have Froggen. Like, these are the guys that should have the balls. These are the guys that should be making the final shots on the team. Like, oh my god, all this investment into FBI contracts, into who he and like, oh, I don't know.
And just to reiterate what I said on a past episode, listen, definitely, I flamed you a lot when you were on Golden Guardians. I thought you were bad. I thought it couldn't get any worse. I was wrong. Come back. All's forgiven.
No, but I mean, I don't know, like, so, I mean, something irks me off Froggen though. Like, I don't know what it is, but it's like, I wish he would just take more control. Like,
sure,
dude is like, he's mechanically good, but for sure he's trolling in some way. Like, his champion pool is kind of troll. He's doing some mistakes in there, but for sure this guy has talent. Now, I don't know why he doesn't use it to actually take control of teams. Like, if I were him, like I would just say, okay, this is my style. You play the style, and that's what we're gonna do from now on. And we're gonna make sure that every aspect of that style is covered by me, right? Like, and I don't see that. Like, I see them making mistakes on side lanes. Like, suddenly they don't push out waves as far as they should. Then suddenly, like this, their bot lane dies. Their jungle doesn't do the right play. If you're taking if you're already like picking weird champions, make sure that everyone is on board with it. And make sure to take control. Otherwise, it's not going to work out.
I will say that's an area, from knowing him personally, that I actually agree definitely. I've told Loco this in the past. One of the problems I actually think he has as a player is this is actually something that I think is a key principle in games, is if you want to be the star player or the best player or in any way a leader, you have to take responsibility. That's the whole concept of being the star or the leader. And the responsibility, if you're the carry, goes like this. If you give me the resources, then if I don't carry the game, that's on me. That's what I get the credit if I win, so I also get the blame if I lose. The problem is, what you can sometimes do, and this is what I feel like Froggen does, is since he's like, well, I never told him to pick those champions. I never said he couldn't do that. I just pick him out. I just play mid lane, dude. It's like, if you can do that, but then you're just another cog in the machine. And at the end, yeah, you could just say, well, it's not my fault that happened. I played the lane out fine. It's like, yeah, but you are the best player on the team, mate. Like, you are supposed to sort of be a leader on some level. And as you're saying, like, the other way to say it is this. If this team does badly and Froggen could perhaps have had a bigger impact on how they played, it's his own legacy he fucks over. Like, no one's going to remember FBI in 4 years. He's not going to be a legend of League of Legends who everyone looks back at, oh, how did he do it? It's Froggen's own career that actually will suffer if he doesn't do it. So he might think he can just be another player, but I think it's kind of a bad approach. I agree. Like, if I were him, I would want to be involved in every level. Leadership, who you recruit and bring to the team, what coaching staff you have. But that does carry the implication, like I said, if you had impact in all those areas and then you lost, you would also take a lot of blame. But I think that's just part of that's the deal. That's the deal you go for.
Then we have to do it.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you can talk. Actually, okay, then I'll take the ball. I think maybe it is because, like, I mean, this is just a purely hypothetical situation, right? Like, I think I would like to see him in EU because I think Froggen in EU would take so much more responsibility and it has so much more agency because the coaching staff and the players are on the same level. The hierarchy is not like this, you know? I think in Love and A teams, at least what I feel like, I don't know how it is in Gold Guardians, but I feel like the overall consensus is that coaching staff has to find the same with everything. Like, coaching staff and then the management above it, and then like the owner. So basically I have like 4 to 5 people to basically answer to, and I feel like a player can never take as much control in an A as he can take in EU. The only exception to that rule is probably Bjergsen. So I think he's the only, Doublelift maybe. Like, those are the only 2 people who are like, oh, they're franchise players, and they will not just be, they are the franchise. They will make sure that everything goes their way. So I think a lot of players in an A are not either respected well enough by the orgs to do that, or they're just not taking the responsibility. I think maybe because it's so much more common in A, it's because of the hierarchy thing, where it's just such a huge difference between the bottom, which is basically the players, and like the owners and whatever.
And for an org the size of Golden Guardians, I know they're backed by Golden State Warriors, but they don't have anything else in esports, and it's a very small operation. Like, that's a team where Froggen can have a lot of control. But in terms of like Froggen's control thing and Froggen being a leader and doing things just beyond playing the game, I think a lot of that changed for him during the period of the Alliance, Elements, Echo Fox, like that era, like that really bad, I would say, like 2 to 3 years Froggen had. Like, it probably changed him as a person in terms of like how he wants to, like how much he wants to be in terms of like management, roster, like how he wants to be as a leader. Like, because I think that was like when there are myths of Froggen's caliber and there are myths better than Froggen. But back then, Froggen was like one of the few that were like absolute top tier class, not just in the West, all over the world. And he did nothing with his career like during that stint, and I think that part probably changed him a little, like how much he wants to participate.
I can see that.
I've also seen as well, and this is something I've seen in Counter-Strike, a lot of things over the years, is it's very different when you're in a winning team and everyone in the team's good and everyone has a mentality to winning, and it's just keep that going. Whereas when you're in teams that have flaws in them, and especially like you're talking about the Elements teams that were all failing, Echo Fox didn't have enough good players. When you're in teams like this, you can go the other way if you're a good player, and your whole approach becomes, not literally, you don't consciously think this obviously, but if you look at the way they behave, it becomes, like I said before, it's like, well, as long as I do my job, no one can say it was my fault if I lost the game. So, that's it. It's kind of like, as opposed to trying to be the one who takes all the credit and all the blame if you win, you just try to make sure you don't get blamed when you lose. And so you lose trust. If you play with enough bad players, you're not going to trust all your teammates. It's like there was a great analogy. I remember when I've told you this before, Loco. When Kobe Bryant used to have the really bad Lakers teams, one of the things he used to say, if journalists used to try and claim he was a ball hog, is say like, "What? So me passing to a guy who's going to miss the shot's going to help us win the game?" So he's not wrong. The point there is, this is why I give this example. Is to be fair, if you know the situation in that guy's career at the time, it's true some players didn't want to play with him. So it's kind of like he'd created a scenario that he wasn't wrong in each isolated incident. He's right. That guy sucks. Why should I pass to him? But what he didn't seem to realize was you have to kind of like meet them halfway. So on one level, like he's right, you don't pass to that guy, but you also have to make sure that people know you would be willing to if there was a player that could make the shot, if you know what I mean. Whereas actually, I also get the feeling that players who play with Froggen, it's just a complete package. They know what he's going to do already. They don't think he can change anything. He's going to play his champion. He's going to play them where he wants to play them. He's going to do that. He also apparently doesn't take too much leadership in that aspect. So we're all just his teammates. It's not really a great mentality to have in a team, I don't think.
There's a certain responsibility that comes with an ability. Like if you're as good as Froggen, if you have capability of carrying the team, then you need to speak up and you need to ask for the ball. Like if we don't
Spider-Man recently, or
I mean, we don't blame contracts in the same way, even though he's playing bad, because he doesn't have the ability to carry the team. But Froggen does, so there's way more blame on Froggen than there is on contracts.
Yep. I think that's fair. I think it's fair either way on that one.
No, for sure. Like, I mean, yeah, I've come when I was bad teams too. You know, like that fire goes out at some point. You just can't do anything about it. Like, so I can kind of understand where he's coming from. So there may be some things that may be like really inherent to that experience, but honestly, sometimes you have to have the mental reset and just go into it with a fresh mind. And I think maybe take half a year break or at least like 2 months break and just completely reset the mindset, because you cannot blame your teammates for their failures. In the end, if you have good ability, you should just pull through.
Sure. Plus, it's like you said earlier, where you'd rather be the guy who takes the shot, and then if you lose the game, you know it was you who did it, or you would have won the game or lost the game. Similar, like, think about how whack this story is. Imagine 3 years from now, you say, "Oh, Froggen, what happened to that scenario where you almost did the playoffs? Oh, I gave the other guy a shot and he missed." Who was the other guy? Says the name of a player you've never heard of. Like, that's a shit story. Why didn't you take the shot? You know, like in that scenario, it all makes exact sense what you should have done now.
Golden Guardian,
die on your own back if you can be the carry.
Golden Guardians should have missed playoff with Froggen playing Vel'Koz, Karthus, Anivia, Lux, whatever of those champions. Not
you
with
could sleep at night if you did that, mate.
Not Froggen playing Karma. Not Froggen playing Karma and Contracts playing Lee Sin. All right, let's get us to a different
topic.
Anyway,
let's do the playoffs anyway, because obviously we can do direct matchups here.
Yeah.
So in the playoffs, we have CLG plays against Optic, and then we have TSM against Clutch. Now, the interesting thing about that is, if you remember the last time CLG played against Optic, Optic actually beat them. That was the game I remember where, let me see what week it was. It was actually last week. It was the first game of last week. Oh no, CLG actually beat Optic in that one. My apologies. I'm thinking of something else. Who else? Oh, I think it's 100 Thieves actually beat Optic. CLG briefly. Yeah, I was mixing the two games up. So anyway, what do you think about this matchup here? Amazing. Like, CLG is the higher seed here. Is Optic a good matchup into them?
I think Crown really needs to pull off for them to win, because I don't see any other way. Like, if I look at top lane, like Rune against Dokla, that's really Rune favorite. If I look at Wiggly, Meteos, there's nothing between one another. They're equally good. It's gonna be fine, you know. Like, but the mid lane is like basically the same matchup, because bot lane is also, I think, the way that Bifrost plays right now and the way that also Stixxer play, they make zero mistakes in lane. They are not going to be abused by some kind of cheese-driven bot lane, because like what Big and Mr. Arrow play continuously is like basically these Draven or Nautilus bot lanes, which are really hyper aggressive. But if you play against bot lane that knows what to do against them, like, there's going to be abuse. So I honestly think if Crown doesn't pop off together with Meteos and mid-jungle synergy, there's no hope for them, and I think they're going to get 3-0.
What do you think, Loco?
Dude, Optic's such a feel-good story, but if you look at the reality of their situation, they started 4-0, and then they barely scraped into playoffs. And they are very, very heavily carried by Meteos and Crown, and they're kind of the reverse 100 Thieves, and they don't know what to do like mid and late games. You're not going to see 3 games determined by early games in the playoffs. So I actually don't think they really have a shot versus CLG, and this is one of the easiest ones to call.
Yeah, I even said before, like, the sad thing for Optic is I actually felt like if they could have gone up one more spot and if they were playing TSM, that would be an interesting matchup. I feel like they had the players to go into the weaknesses of TSM there. But I agree. I think CLG is a terrible matchup. If you watch the actual game CLG played against Optic, it was depressing. Like, all CLG did is 24/7 just pick them off all the time. They were like 3v1ing people all the time for the first, like, 20 minutes of the game. So I think Optic is a team. The problem is as well, I don't think they're a very good team fighting team, actually. Like, they have some good players, like you say, but they have to have that advantage in mid jungle. So they don't particularly have it in this matchup. Maybe slightly, but it's not a big enough of an edge, you know. And I also do think that the bot lane dies way too much for a team that plays that aggressively.
I just feel like people went so far the other way on Optic, where everyone was shitting on Optic before the season started, and they started doing well, so people like just went the other way around, and no one's like shitting on Optic. Like, they're not that good. Like, there's all these memes about, oh, big dokes, like how good Crown and Meteos are. Like, Crown and Meteos have been good, but Optic overall as a team, like what they bring, like, look at their team fight. Look at how they set up around objectives. Like, look how messy they can get, and look at the big macro mistakes they make. Like, they're just not a team that's going to be able to take a series off CLG. I'm sure they could take a game off of CLG, but like, realistically, I really feel like they have no shot.
I'll also say, like, props to them for even making the playoffs. Like, that in itself is an accomplishment. But yeah, I don't really see what they can do beyond that.
So isn't it kind of weird when you talk about LEC, when people make playoffs, it's like not really an accomplishment. When you talk about LCS, like a team making the play, like, good job, you're so fucking good, you know.
It's really also because, to be fair, unfortunately, like, especially this last 2 years, it feels like outside of the absolute best LCS teams, the rest of the teams are all just a fucking mess. Like, the rosters are all over the place. Like, what's weird is NA's got like a really even spread of talent. Like, there's not, you don't really have like the 4th, 5th, 6th teams that are all super stacked, you know. In Europe, it's a bit more, you can see the hierarchy makes more sense based on who your players are, you know. I feel like a lot of the GMs have done a very weird job in NA, and there's been so many fucking academy players subbed into main teams as well. So that's why, in a weird way, for like half the league, just making the playoffs was an accomplishment.
Actually, yeah, you're actually right.
Not everyone's good enough to make playoffs amazing, you know.
Okay, well, I still blame it on one person.
Exactly. Listen, Loco, all I'm going to say is, you never made the playoffs of fucking Worlds without amazing.
Yeah, wait, what the? I never. I made Worlds with Centurion, and I made playoffs with the TL rookie roster.
The two players who carried you to the playoffs of Worlds, Loco, is Amazing and Svenskeren.
Actually, yeah. Oh shit!
He got the assist on that one.
Okay, it took a bit.
Yeah, it's alright. He got the assist on that one. Yeah.
Oh shit! Dude. Don't talk about that game. I don't even. Never again.
Speaking on the,
I haven't watched the ending to that one yet, right? To the last game of that SK game. I mean, I've not watched the ending yet.
There's some games you play or you coach and you never look at again. There's no value to it. There's only sadness there.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's one of those.
There's no point. What would you learn from it? Nothing that you could ever apply. So don't worry about that.
All right. Speaking on the other side of the matchup, how good has CLG been, and how excited are you guys for CLG? Are they a team that can make a deep run?
Yeah, for sure. I think they're actually really good. So I don't know what it is, but like I feel like whenever I see them play, and that's like something that I've observed, is that they have really distinct lines in the game that they're like, the enemies cannot cross, we cannot cross. And it's like they're really good at playing around like their priorities at all times, and they never make mistakes around it. I don't know if it's Aryan, I don't know if it's like Korean bootcamp, but they rarely make mistakes around that kind of play. And it's like so many A teams I see pushing wave too far, you know, roaming too early, these kind of things, and CLG just doesn't do it. They're really standard, but they're really good at playing standard, and that makes them so much better than every other team besides like basic TL and C9. That I'm actually scared if I was C9 to go up against them, because C9, for example, which is maybe a semi-final matchup, is that C9 plays somewhat randomly while trying to establish some control. But against a team that's really controlled, for example, Fnatic in 2018, right, when they faced them in the semis, they got completely demolished. There was no chance for them. And I think that may be a similar story where CLG can become a team that is that controlled, that someone like C9 or even like an Optic, obviously, is not going to be making any plays against them, just going to lose like 10-0 and game's over.
Yeah, that's one. The thing is, like, Loco, following up on the conversation we had on the last one, I think when you look at the CLG team, like, Weldon has to be one of the primary candidates to win Coach of the Split, because they just look how clean the team looks in comparison to where they started when they had Darshan way back at the beginning of the year. Like, the development's been massive. And then, like, the only player who basically I think even makes a lot of mistakes is just Ruin. And then he is like a Korean who's just brought in out of nowhere to play top lane. So, like, his job is just don't be Darshan. So he's doing a great job of that. So,
Oh God.
congrats. He's A+ job on that one.
Right.
If I
Damn, I can tie both your points in really well together. So Amazing talked about CLG not making mistakes, and then Doran talked about Darshan getting kicked. So Weldon did this interview where how they decided to replace Darshan. So in baseball, there's this thing called forced errors and unforced errors. Unforced error is like someone just making a mistake on their own. A forced error is you putting pressure on someone and you putting someone in this point where it's hard to make a decision and they make the wrong choice, and that's called the forced error. So CLG in their off season, they looked back on all their games and then they counted the forced errors and unforced errors of all their players. And this is how it reads in the interview. So we counted all the errors that we made, and then afterwards we kicked Darshan. So obviously they thought Darshan was making the most unforced errors, and then they kicked Darshan. And I think a lot of their coaching has to do with like pointing out, hey, this is an unforced error. Like, this is an error or mistake, like that should never be happening, and really refining on that. They are a team, like, they are very systematic and they don't make like big dumb mistakes. Like the classic, like the Zben one, like the one at Baron versus TL, and then the one recently versus FlyQuest, like dying at Red Buff. Like, you never see mistakes like that from CLG players. Like, they make wrong decisions sometimes. They can get out muscle sometimes, but they are a team that doesn't make big mistakes.
This makes it sound like Weldon works like he charges by the hour, because he brought everyone in, right? I'd like to announce the world unveiling of my new machine, the Unforced Error Bot 5000. He brings in this massive, like, old school machine, nothing like the World's Fair, like 1920. He's like pulling all levers. If you'll just wait there, ladies and gentlemen, it's just calculating on our team which one of our players made the most errors. Actually, like, a little kid's going to raise his hand, but sir, I think I know. No, never mind that, sir. This is science. This is science, son. Listen. Oh, it's come to loads of like mathematical equations on the fucking ticket here. Oh, it turns out it was Darshan at the end. It's like, well, we all knew that, didn't we? Nobody fucking saw him play the game. You can only play one champion. It was a champion that literally dies and then just can keep going after being dead. Like, there's a reason why he was playing that champion. Like, listen, I appreciate the effort, and in the future, this system could be very useful, Loco. But that's one of those ones where I don't feel like we needed that to get to the end and tell us Darshan was the one who needed to be kicked. You know, like,
That's how they arrived at the conclusion.
Long way there. He took the long way to get to that one, didn't he? Fucking hell.
I think it's not a terrible way, because at least you can go up to a player, and when you're having that talk, like, you're letting him know like how they arrived at that process. It probably doesn't feel good either way, but it's better than we thought you were just the worst players.
Oh, if you could have some stats and stuff. Then again, though, that could also be even more depressing if you get kicked and someone hands you like a 20-page report on why you suck, mathematically proven on a computer.
Oh,
like,
God.
All graphs and shit. Like,
in like actual workplaces, like exit interviews are very normal part of the process, and I'm sure in esports in the future that'll be a normal part of the process.
You done a lot of exit interviews?
Yeah, exactly.
Let's go one step further. You don't do a lot of exit interviews when the exits are very sudden and controversial.
There we go. Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, the thing is, you had a literal exit interview once, Loco.
What?
It's because you didn't interview. You got exited from the team, isn't it?
Oh my God! Shut up.
That was pretty good. That wasn't bad. You know, you didn't know it was an exit interview at the time, but it turned out it was.
Yeah, little did I know.
Exactly. Anyway, what about the other matchup then? This is the one that I feel like spicy, because on paper, I'm still not ready when I see these names on paper to believe that Clutch can beat TSM. It's like, just seeing those names is like, but Clutch beats TSM. Clutch is trying to sell, right? They were never even good. And then DeMonte is going to beat Björk. But then when you actually look at the teams in the server, it's not even ridiculous to have this discussion. Like, this is a series that has upset potential. You don't think so, Amazing?
I'm not sure. Like, so I think, as I said earlier, like the CG kind of relies on like basically picking people off and like doing random stuff in order to win. I do think that TSM is individually too good for that to happen. Like, I think Broken Blade is he's not gonna be scared by Huni. Bjergsen's gonna manhandle like DeMonte. Let's be real here. And honestly, jungle matchup is the only thing I could see going really wrong. Like, because if Spica is not feeling it, or like he's really scared on stage, I think Lyra will destroy him. Like, that's for sure gonna happen. But I do think that overall, like, when I match them even individually, I think TSM is better. And then I do think TSM, at least especially with Reggie's preparation now, they're gonna watch every single game 20 times, and we're gonna make sure that they're not gonna make any random mistakes in CG. And I think CG, and that's where I don't think they're gonna be in a bad position at all. And I think TSM should take it like 3-1 or 3-2, like at worst. Like 3-2 is the worst case scenario.
Let me push you a little bit on the bot lane. I think TSM bot lane's been pretty bad, and even they recognize it because they brought subs for that. And Clutch, on the other hand, I think bot lane is one of their most consistent and shining points with Cody Sun and Vulcan. Are you not worried on that side?
No, I mean, I know Niert, I know Sven, like, and even though he had that one unforced error against TL in the last playoffs, every single playoffs he delivers. Like, it doesn't matter what happens. He's actually I mean, I guess he had the bad series against Hakuo 2 once, but maybe I'm just like killing my own point right now. But I do think that Sven, at least from playing with him, he's a really good player performer, and he's not gonna be anxious. He's not gonna be scared to go up against certain players. And I think not being scared in CG is basically half the work. If you're not scared of their plays, like, you could take away a lot of their power, because they are not gonna play like they're the superior team or the superior individuals anymore. So,
if you account history, I 100% agree with you. But if you erase the names and look at like the form coming into this playoff, I don't know, TSM bot lane, I would be scared. They just are so mistake prone. They get solo killed. They don't really build their own leads. Like, I don't know what to say.
The thing is, though, the one thing they have going for them is that somehow, inexplicably, they ended up playing Clutch in the playoffs. Like I said, I actually think either of those teams, dude, 100 Thieves or Golden Guardians, I'd love to see either of those two teams play TSM. I mean, that would have been a really interesting matchup. It's just that I kind of agree. I think, unfortunately, in this round of the playoffs, we just got the wrong teams matched up against each other. If you could swap the two top seeds and who they play, I think you get a way better set of matchups. So I would agree. I think TSM wins this. I do think they'll definitely bleed, though. I think they'll give at least one game up. So I could easily see them looking ropey even when they win. And also, I will say, the player I think who has the biggest potential to win this series for Clutch Gaming is probably Cody Sun. Like, I think if he actually pops off, he could have a pretty nice play. I think he's actually resurrected his career somewhat playing with Clutch. So kind of like turned it around a bit. So I think that's not a bad factor to have there. But I would still pick TSM to win the series. I don't really see why they wouldn't.
So how close do you think it's going to be? Like, if you had to put odds on it, do you think it's like 70-30 TSM, 60-40?
I think it's 60-40 TSM.
Yeah, I don't think the odds are that huge between them. It's just, I kind of agree with Amazing. Like, just stylistically, it's not that great a matchup for Clutch. In fact, the ridiculous thing about Clutch, if you look at the end of the split, it's like almost all their losses just come to the top 4 teams, including TSM. So they're actually the team who can only beat the lesser teams generally.
They can't beat anyone that they respect. It's really weird, but everyone they don't respect, they can beat. That's how I see CG. Like, for sure. I think it may have something to do with the top laners too. Maybe it's Huni's mentality that he's like, this guy is bad, I'm going to trash him. And then the whole team is like, yeah, let's go, you know? But I don't think it's going to happen against Broken Blade. I don't think it's going to happen against CSM.
So whenever I need like a temperature gauge on how the matchup is going to go, like, I'll look at like other shows. So I looked at The Dive, and Freak actually said Clutch would beat TSM 3-0. And then another thing I'll do is sometimes I'll check betting website and I'll check their odds, because like for us, like, if you
make money or what?
No, I can never bet personally, because I consult for teams sometimes, and then I'll help out with teams. So I can never.
What were the odds then?
Bet.
What were the odds on the sites?
So the odds if TSM wins, all the websites have very similar odds. The odds if TSM wins is 1.4. So if you put $1 in, you get $1.40 back. So the odds for Clutch is 2.7. So if you put $1 in, you would get $2.70 back. That's like
almost twice as good odds for TSM.
It's incredible underdog odds for Clutch, and I think the matchup is so close. So yeah, like, I mean, if you want to make money, go for it, I guess. I think this is a really good bet.
Obviously, the weird thing about those sites is, like, they can't know what the draft's going to be, so they can't really be, like, super accurate. But I have to say, because I remember during Worlds, when we did that one where we worked with that gambling site, the actual amount of times they got the right person, like, they did a good job with the odds, was actually impressive. I would have thought it would be way more random, and they were getting it loads of times, if you remember, Loco, when we used to tell the actual stats. Like, most of the times, that is the team that won.
I mean, they have to, because if they're wrong, like, they lose so much money. If we're wrong, like, people tweet at us and call us idiots on Twitch chat. Like, their stakes are so much higher, so you have to respect. Like, I would imagine for most betting like sites like that have analytics, like their analytics are on par or even better than most of what teams are working at, or the analytics sites like Mobalytics or stuff like that.
No doubt.
Didn't know that. That's interesting.
Well, it's because one of the reasons why I can actually tell you this is happening at many of those sites is what they do basically amazing. It's quite a genius business concept is if someone plays on their site and is amazing at betting on the site, like they're always picking the winners and they've got a really great strat, what they'll do is they'll just go to that person and say, I'll just pay you loads of money to be the guy who makes the odds.
Yeah.
It's quite a clever approach if you think about
That's
it.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And so as a result, I know for one site I worked with a long time ago, that's how they got their odds really good. It's because the guy who was making all the winning bets had his own, computer model he'd made that took into account. So what they did is just bought it off him, basically. It's a pretty clever idea.
Do you guys know Noah Winston? I'm sure I know Doran knows Noah, but do you know Noah Winston?
I know.
So that's how Noah Winston got started in esports. So there was like this fantasy esports site, and Noah made tons of money off of that. So they reached out to Noah like, dude, you're really smart. And then they picked him up, and then that's how, he became like an owner, CEO of Immortals.
And then what happened was he thought to himself, right, well, I'm fucking killing it at playing Fantasy League of Legends.
And I'm going to gamble on something else too.
So I'll go gamble on real life League of Legends. And then everyone was like, oh, you idiot, real life's different from fantasy, isn't it? He's like, oh, what did I do? Curse you. Why did I think
Wait, Hooney? Yeah. Rainover? Yeah. Pay him shitload? Yeah.
No, what's great is his strategy was so genius. His negotiation strategy was like, right, what are they offering you? Like X. I pay you 3x, and then they're like, yeah, deal. He's like, fools, I'm the best businessman in the world. Everyone says yes to my deals. It's like, well, maybe it doesn't make sense to pay someone 3 times if they would have taken 2 times. Just saying,
I mean, it worked out great for the coaches and players. I'll say that.
That's some adventure capital right there, for sure.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. What about? Let me think. I'll tell you what else we can do. Obviously, MVP is only supposed to count the regular portion of the split. It's not supposed to actually count playoffs. So in theory, we can pick our MVP now. Like, who would you pick? Amazing. Who do you think the MVP of LCS was this split?
I think it should be a TL player.
Okay.
Like, it sounds dumb, but I think they're so far ahead of the rest that I think it would be an insult to them to not give it to them.
I'll just say, if you want like a hint, most people from TL are picking the guy who won it last split, Core JJ. I think that's most people's pick.
Yeah, Core JJ or Xmithy, like either or. Like both of them are really far ahead of anyone in the league right now. So I think either one of them should take it. If it's not a TL player, then I think it has to be. I mean, it's so hard, CRG is really good, but they're not like there's no definite player though. I'm like, oh, this guy's really good.
That's a tough one to pick the star of, isn't it?
So, making Spica.
What?
Acadian.
Well, technically, he's the most valuable jungler in TSM.
I'm joking. I'm joking. No, I don't know. It would have to be. I think Niski or Svenskeren, but Svenskeren hasn't played enough games for me to say that because the narrative is that he's playing really well, but he wasn't in every game.
Subbed him a few times. Yeah,
subbed him a few times. So I think maybe Niski, because he's playing phenomenally too. This split, and I think he has outperformed a lot of mid laners, maybe even like every mid laner in the league right now. So I don't think it would be weird for me to give it to anyone else, but on a tier player. But if anything, it would be Niski. Yeah.
Okay. So I have, as with you, I have Core JJ. I don't think Core JJ is gonna win because no one's really preaching for Core JJ to be MVP, and also there's
voter fatigue.
Yeah, voter fatigue. No one wants to see the same person win twice, and people aren't talking about, oh my god, Core JJ is even better than Doublelift. That was last split where Core JJ is the only support that Doublelift ever laned with that's better than him. Look how good he is. We aren't talking about that a lot. So I actually think the person that's most likely to win is gonna be Svenskeren. If I had a vote, I would vote Core JJ, but I think Svenskeren's gonna win it because all the casters are talking about how good he is, and I think what casters say have so much influence on who wins.
Yeah.
And that's the storyline that's been pushed.
Well, I'll give you a reason why that's even totally logical. It's not even that they're trying to spin a fake narrative and fuck everyone. I can tell you I've found this myself whenever I've watched the UFC. Right, there's been certain fights, right, where basically fans of the UFC said Joe Rogan, one of the main commentators, they were like, oh, he was too biased in this fight. And what you do basically to test whether you agree he was biased is you watch the fight back without the commentary, and you just try and see, right, if there's no commentary, how do I see the fight? Because actually what you'll find is the way the commentator talks about what's happening kind of sets your judgment of what you're about to see. So if for example the two fighters both punch each other a similar amount, but to him he says, oh, he hit him with that one. Like in your brain, you then register it as like, right, well, that's an edge for this guy. And like those little things do add up, and it does shape the week. Because when I've done that experiment before and I've watched it without the commentators, sometimes they had a point, and sometimes it was like, actually, yeah, I did think like one guy blatantly won, whereas actually it was a lot closer when I didn't have like sort of the reinforcement of what the commentator was saying. So I kind of agree with you, Loco. I think if the commentators themselves mention it, if they build the narrative, if they reiterate it, if every time they win a game, Cloud9, they say, look, possible MVPs, that will affect people in the long run. Even just the names you think of it when you're trying to decide yourself, that'll be the first one you think of.
Yeah, and he's not a bad one to win it, but I think that's the storyline that's been pushed the heaviest.
Yeah, but like, can an MVP actually be subbed out?
Well, this is my issue. Is like basically, I have the same two picks as the two of you. I would say CoreJJ or Svenskeren should be the MVP. I don't mind either. I think they both have very good cases. But I would say this. I already didn't mind if CoreJJ won, because I agree. I think he's been amazing. And my biggest problem is, like, Svenskeren would be a great pick for MVP, but he actually was subbed out for 4 games this split.
Mm-hmm.
There's only 18 games in the whole split. So, like, I'm not hating on him, but for me, that means he has to do even more in the less games he plays than CoreJJ to make himself a clear winner. So, if I was already close, I'll edge it to CoreJJ and say he wins it. So, indirectly, Loco, the real fucking 200 IQ Reaper move was fucking his own. He had the MVP of the league, and he fucked his own player out to win the MVP. That is truly 200 IQ. I've never seen any coach do that before.
Dude, you get so much credit. You get so much credit. Like, you can be like, look at TL, look at all their players. They even have the MVP on their team. On the other hand, if Svenskeren won MVP, then people would be like, look at C9. The Reaper's a good coach, but he has that MVP player.
Yeah.
Actual 200 IQ.
Okay. He's just keeping out the motivation for next year. Making sure he doesn't get it this year, so he has to work harder next year. That's how it works. Loco never did that. He made sure that none of his players would ever win MVP.
What? There's one MVP all the time. All right, let's talk about
This is a quick aside. I actually saw in that article I was referring to earlier that Kelsey made, where she was talking about like all the different jungle problems, etc. Dude, you should see the stats for like jungle ganks in the Dyrus era, because when Dyrus is on TSM, it drops to something mental, like 10% of the ganks go to him in like the first 15 minutes. It's like that's literally just like fuck your lane, you're just done, mate. We're going to the other part of the map all the time, and he's just like, this is my life.
Honestly though, Dyrus was a hard person to gank for, because one, he wouldn't carry with the lead, and he was a tank player, and Bjerg was the best player in the league at the time, and it's incredibly easy to gank for. And Lustboy often plays stuff like Thresh, Annie, Nautilus, so our bot lane was also really easy to gank for. So I think it makes perfect sense to not gank for Dyrus. Like, it just got overblown, but it wasn't like we were abusing him. It just made no sense to gank that lane comparatively.
I mean, no, in 2014 at Worlds we actually ganked a ton for him. Like, Connor ganked a ton, like when he played carry matchups, but you know, when we're in the playoffs, like, put him on Lulu every single game or Maokai. So what are you going to do with Lulu or Maokai? Are they going to carry the game, like build AP? It's not going to happen. So it made sense for what we did.
Yeah, and we figured out the game in a sense where Lulu Maokai function with no gold. Like, it doesn't matter if your Lulu has 10 or 6 items or 2 items.
Is what you need it for, yeah.
Yeah, and the same for Maokai. Maokai has invulnerability with his W. Like, he's just there to tank. He has his old ult was a percentage reduction AoE. So you just had to build HP and you'd be incredibly tanky. So he was so broken without gold. So the way we figured out the game, it made no sense to give any resource to top.
Yeah.
At the time, I didn't tell Dyrus that. I said it's just best for the team. Like, I guess I could have explained it better to him, and maybe it would have gone over better, because he was also bitter. He was also bitter about like him not getting ganks, and I just like said, this is what's best for the team. This is what's best for the team, instead of just like, I guess, being more logical with him and telling him, hey, like, Bjergsen's the best player in the league. Like, we're playing all these hook champions bot lane, and your champion just doesn't function without gold.
I really don't think that he had the explanation at hand at that point. I think you're just making up right now.
I knew that. No, I knew that. Okay,
Yeah, sure.
well, I knew. No. Here's what I knew.
We could put a lie detector on you if we went back online now. I don't know if you passed this one, mate.
Here's what I knew. Ganks bot lane were working great. Ganks mid lane were working great. When we invested resources into top, it wasn't working great. So
it sounds like something you've been thinking of when you're laid awake at night. You can't sleep thinking of all the sins you've committed, and you're just looking at the ceiling of the thing. You're thinking, how would I have explained it though if they asked me? And so then you wait for the next reunion, you rock up. All right, Dyrus, actually, you're like Weldon. You come with a fucking report. Here's actually a scientific report as to why it never made sense to gank top. There's nothing personal.
I'll talk to him at TwitchCon and I'll explain to him.
Sure.
All right. I think that's the end, isn't it?
Wait, no. There's something I want to ask Amazing for before we end. Amazing, you've developed a very vocal enemy on Twitter. The best solo queue jungler player at the moment, Tarzan. So I'll explain the beef.
Okay.
Amazing, or Centaurian got rank 1, and he posted on Twitter that, oh, look, I got rank 1. And then Amazing posted on Twitter, Amazing replied to Centaurian, now all you need to do is develop an attitude, because the previous rank 1 player is the solo queue player named Tarzan. And then Tarzan made tweets, getting clips from Amazing's gameplay at LCS, where Amazing was making mistakes, and then he also trying to flame him, and he also made tweets about, oh, the North American competitive scene isn't about like who's the best, it's about like who sucks up or like who has the biggest names. And then most recently, Amazing publicly made like posts about Tarzan and about I feel bad for him, like he just wants like, or Amazing can explain what he said in his tweet. I don't want to speak for him.
I mean, I don't even remember what I tweeted, but I think it was more along the lines that, like, you know, I feel bad for him because, like, you know, some people are always stuck in like this. Everyone else is at fault, you know. I'm never doing mistakes, you know. Like, some blaming everyone around them. But you know, in the end, it's like this. You know, if you're a solo queue jungler and you're good enough, people will try out. It's just how it works. If you're not good enough, then the tryouts fail, and you have maybe another run like a half year later because split ends, you know. So then you have another shot. But if your whole personality and your whole playstyle is about you being basically abusive, like verbally towards other players, you know, at every single moment in your life, and you think that's and you think that's not holding you back, like, I don't know what to do with you, you know, like there's nothing to do. So I think I kind of wanted to resonate that with like a lot of other solo queue players, you know, that especially in EU, it's like really more common for people to be toxic and thus like get picked up. Like, honestly, like, don't make your life harder by being toxic. Like, you can flame all you want in real life, like scream at your monitor, throw a mouse at the wall, you know, break it. Who cares? But as long as you're with other people verbally, like, and like in Discord, whatever it is, or in TeamSpeak, like, why the hell would you be the same way? So for me, it's like this, you know, like, either you're good enough to make it and people can put up with your toxicity. If you're not at that point, don't be toxic. That simple.
I'd also throw in as well, like, it's a classic mistake that players in many regions make, that when they're really good in solo queue, so in this case he's someone who could probably take rank 1 anytime he wants if he grinds, they then make the mistake of thinking, I'm as good as the players that are pros I play in solo queue. It's like this. There's the thing, mate. So you can say what you like about Amazing. We've seen what he did when he was in the game. We actually know what level he has on stage in an LCS team. We have no clue how Tarzan would do. I'm sure you can attest to this. There's been plenty of amazing talents who just never made it in pro play.
Shook is actually a really good example. Like, if you think about Shook, like, he had one good split where he made where he went to the Worlds with Alliance, but before that he was like 3 or 4 years, he was basically the best or one of the best solo queue junglers amongst me and Diamond Prox. And he never translated that to stage, because on stage, the mechanics that you train in solo queue are not applicable. You're not going to abuse someone else's mistake necessarily unless you're way better than him. The only thing you have to make happen is make plays like at certain times and understand how to communicate at a certain level. I think solo queue players like completely forget that part about the game. Like, mechanics are basically maybe just one little part of my game right now that is actually like meaningful to me and meaningful to a lot of other players within my team. If I don't communicate the same way that I do and like get better mechanics for it, I will probably like make for other people worse. If I suddenly don't take enough agency within like the coaching staff meetings or like the meetings that we have as a team, you know, and don't talk to them about like champion picks, that kind of stuff, I will lose another part of my game. So it's a lot more staggered and a lot like there's a lot more to being a pro player, especially someone that is especially jungler, and I think like a shot calling role, than people give credit for. And I think
you've got to be a lot more well-rounded.
Yeah, a lot more.
Because like I say, like what's the biggest fucking pressure Tarzan's ever had in his life? What, being in promos to go up in a challenger, playing with a girl for the first time when she
tryouts.
Yeah, exactly.
He had tryouts. So he had tryouts, and then he also had games where I forgot what it was. It was for some tournament, and most infamously, like, he told his support player, "I'm gonna fucking rip your head off if you keep talking to me that way." So, in high pressure situations, like, that's what Tarzan delivered.
That's just being a psychopath, dude. At that point, like, Jesus Christ.
All right,
but yeah.
Well, ending on that note, amazing. Do you have any final words before we close out the show?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
All right. Don't get anything from you.
Oh, good gemacht.
Okay.
Good gemacht.
All right. Later, guys. Thank you so much for being on.
Cheers.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Thank you so much to our gold Patreon supporters, Butt Pounder 420, Tobias Bernasconi, and Icelandic C9 Fan. Without you guys, Listen Loco wouldn't be possible. And thank you to all our Patreon supporters. Thank you to all our Twitch subs. Thank you to all the YouTube viewers. Thank you to all the Twitch viewers. Thank you to anyone that upvotes this on Reddit. Thank you to anyone that comments on Twitter. Thank you to anyone that just supports the show. Without you guys, the show wouldn't be possible, and I'm so fucking grateful. Thank you.